Now, before I cover the Season 1 abnormalities, I need to cover Dante's notes. Well, they provide some useful insight, especially with some things that haven't been covered yet. Between Chapter 3.5 and Chapter 4, Dante was making notes on what they've been able to piece together, in case they lost their memory again. Between the identities and what they've had the damned dozen fights, they've gathered quite a bit. I'll do what I can to put it together in some kind of coherent lore video. Yes, I know. That's asking for a lot, but I'll do what I can. Anyway, let's start from the beginning. Dante didn't even know where to start, seeing as they didn't remember much to begin with. So they'd make notes as they ran into things. Now, let's start with Limbus Company itself, where Dante works, a name that's, well, most closely related to Dante, but also the hardest to describe them. The others that might know more didn't tell them anything, as, well, they didn't join by choice. The retrieval of the golden bars is just their department's goal, not the entire company's. Each department has its own aims with no common goal, most of the time, but it has substantial backing. Support is never lacking whenever help is required, although not always with meals based on Roger's feedback. Then we have the sinners. Dante defined this as 12 people that are riding Mephistopheles with them, who joined Limbus Company similar to how they did, as in either conscripted or coerced into joining. Well, except perhaps Faust, as she knows more than the others, much more than she's saying, yet they're nicknamed like they're bound there. They asked Virgilius what that meant, but it'd be easier to pull teeth than to get a straight answer out of them. Well, out of him. They formed a contract that they had no choice of opting out of with Dante. Remember the 12 chains that came out of Dante and attached to them? Except less messily than the chains with hooks in the Hellraiser movies. And as a result, they're the only ones that can come back to life, due to them. They are also the only ones that can resonate with the golden bars, which reveals the fathoms of their ego, where they experience their past or peer into their psyche. Now, if that happened to me, it would either kill me or drive me insane, as some things are best left buried. But in their case, it generates strong emotion, and that's needed to resonate. Thankfully, manifesting EGO means that they can't distort. At least according to Moses, the distortion detective. Now, I think the damned dozen is more fitting, as they are truly damned, considering that most of them weren't a part of that team by choice. Now we have the golden bars. Dante understood the golden bars to be small branch-shaped objects that emitted a golden glow. It made their head tingle and induced headaches when they got too close, making them an early warning system, noting that they're more than they appear. It also makes the damned dozen feel dizzy when they're near them, When they retrieve it, it's submitted to HQ, at least according to Virgilius. It's unclear where HQ is or what the end result of gathering these golden bars aims to be, but that's still a ways to go at this point. As for what LCB means, that means Limbus Company Bus, which is the team consisting of Dante and the Damned Dozen. Their purpose is to retrieve the golden bars from the underground branch facilities of Lobotomy Corporation. Their job is also to deal with any task in between branch facilities that is of interest to Limbus Company, such as Yunbongs and the distortion case, for example. As for why, Faust isn't telling. Apparently, their security level is too low. It annoys them that one supposedly under them knows more than the executive manager. No wonder they see themselves as a glorified field medic. Even Emile Sinclair has more respect than Dante. LCC means Limbus Company Clearance. They clear things up and out. They're made to assist the LCB team, and if they die, they stay dead, which means that they have decent gear and equipment. It's split into two teams. LCCB are the before team. Sod and Effie were part of that. The ones that scouted out areas and prepared them for the LCB team. That can include more subtle assignments such as infiltration. LCCA are the after team. They gather and clean up what they've done, such as gathering abnormalities and enkephalin to safeguard it, and make sure that it doesn't cause damage to anyone else before the egg hatches and the abnormality causes trouble once more. As for the nests, they're the urban centres within the city divided into multiple sections, known as districts. Each district has a nest and a backstreets portion. The nest is under the management and protection of a conglomerate called a wing. Backstreets aren't too big of an influence. At least not to those in the nest. Dante asked Virgilius, likely with Faust translating, if he was from a nest or one of the backstreets, but he ignored them. Well, he certainly lived in the backstreets of District 22 before the events of Limbus Company, as it wasn't devastated by a waxy angel of death. But his origins are unknown, although he did kill the parents of some of the orphans that ended up mostly getting killed, or in 2 cases, perhaps worse than death. In fact, I suspect that they're closer than they appear, as far as geographical location is concerned. The wings, now, they could be described as companies with the most advanced and influential technology in their districts, practically ruling over them. Corporate entities or government bodies, well, whatever they are, they're in charge. Each wing has a trademarked technology called a singularity, and they use the funds from them along with ridiculous taxes to manage the high-class urban area inside its district known as a nest. The people that work there are called feathers. As if we need something dehumanizing to remind us that they're cogs in a machine that brings those within it nothing but pain and suffering. They're basically megacorporations, or feudal barons ruling over their private fiefdoms, with the head being the monarch. Let's talk about K-Corp next. A wing in District 11. Its singularity was the HP bullets, or HP ampules, or heliporesis. Whatever you want to call it, it gives the one that uses them a temporary healing factor, as the checkpoint security demonstrated, and also regenerated Dante's lower body, although they needed some new trousers after that. Now, K-Corp utilized this for a number of other applications, food production being one of them, at least according to Samjo. As of Chapter 3.5, there was a foreshadowing that K-Corp wasn't done with Limbus Company yet. Then we have L-Corp, or Lobotomy Corporation, a wing that was in the nest of District 12. This one is a fallen wing, whose spot in District 12 has not yet been filled, so it's likely to be as lawless as the backstreets for the foreseeable future. The epicenter of the White Nights and Dark Days. The branch facilities being a part of this wing. 2 of these are previously covered in the Wonderlab comics series. As for whether or not they'd be featured in Limbus Company, well, we'll see. Then we have N-Corp, a wing in District 14. Now this was covered in the Distortion Detective. Its nest having more white buildings than a Greek coastal city. Part of this is the Knuckle und Hammer, or the Hammer and Nail, Missol having formerly worked for them, noting that Hammer and Nail were 2 factions. The armor-clad Inquisitors were a more recent thing, at least in the numbers that they appeared in when they were fought in Ka, although N-Corp as a whole aren't that different from the other wings. As for the rest, some of the others besides Missol might know. They just see it as, not that relevant yet. There's also the suicide vending machine that is apparently either just a bestseller for them or their singularity. They also only trust what they see, much like the Ring. R-Corp is a wing in District 18. Dante learned from the Damned Dozen that it's not too dissimilar to other wings, although while most other wings utilize their singularities to improve the people's quality of life, they dealt in providing mercenaries, soldiers of fortune, top quality military services, their strength, field experience and mental fortitude impressing Ursus, killing machines at their best. Gregor understood how soldiers can break due to the strain of battle. Dante questioned if they ran war games and simulations, understanding the rabbits as the all-rounders. Hail the rabbits! the reindeer using surgically gained antlers to convert mental strength into physical force. And the rhinos, they provide demolition. One thing that Dante either neglected to mention or didn't want to risk it being in writing is that the singularity of Arcor was cloning. Yes, that's right. They're a literal clone army. Although there is a law that's been established by the head that stated that more than one iteration of an individual can't be around for longer than a real-time week. But Arcor found a way to work around this, although it did involve reverse time dilation and a battle royale scenario. Now W Corp, that's located in the nest of District 23, which is Cannibal Central. Based on conversations with some of the identities, they operate a mass transit service advertised as warp trains, which takes passengers from platform to platform in seconds. But tickets for these are costly, even more so with first-class tickets. Thinking that it was cheaper to drive to wherever you wanted to go, but warp trains were preferred as travel by car can get incredibly complicated, and that's just based on the procedures that they went through to get into K-Corp's nest. Never mind the risk of being robbed by syndicates. There's also wide open roads called highways, connecting the nests. They're available, but they have a set of conditions and costs. They're also inefficient and labyrinthine roads in the back streets, so it can be a hassle to get anywhere, even if the distance is short. As for what the W Corp identities tell Dante, albeit not directly, warp trains, they take no more than a few minutes from the outsider's perspective, but it can take an incredibly long time from the perspective of the passengers, dissolving their their sanity and deforming them beyond recognition. Once it's over, the cleanup agents sort the mess out, making Dante relieved that they were in the bus, although this was based on speculations based on the identities, so Dante would be keeping this to themselves. It's unclear if the disappearance of the first-class passengers in the warp train that had Love Town in it had trashed W Corp's reputation, or if it was blamed on the warp cleanup crew that was fought in the library. There's no mention of what has happened after that. Because at least 16 months have passed since the events of Library of Ruina. Actually, no, at least 14, so let's just say 14 to 16 months. What are fixers? They're freelancers who take care of or help with various jobs and requests in the city. They of course don't work for free. That whole society is based around money, although Dante is unsure if there are no fixers willing to do charity work. Well, as a certain psychotic clown would put it, if you're good at something, never do it for free. They each come from all walks of life. Apparently a common career. They're as prevalent in that society as retail workers are in ours. But you can't become a fixer just because you want to. Well, let's just say that some fixer identities informed them that there are tests that needed to be passed to earn a license. They start at grade 9, and 1 being the highest, while colour is a special grade. Virgilius is one such fixer. Now, offices is a term that encompasses the corporate bodies or any place of business founded by fixers. There's apparently a rule that states that they must be part of an authorized organization of any kind of work. Setting up a one-fixer office is apparently an option. There are a wide variety of offices. The office in District 4, D-Corp's territory, that Yuri was a part of, apparently is a common type. Fixers, offices, and associations being entities that handle requests for a price. Now we cover something new. Sang Association. They are specialists in single combat and dueling requests. It's not common, but there are those that want to settle disputes with a fair and honourable duel. When someone gets involved in a duel, or has someone challenge it, and they're sure that the opponent will clearly tear them a new airway, they send a request to this association to stand in for the client. This is determined from a 7 association identity, apparently. They also have joint conferences and events with other associations as well, due to their requests not being common. Now this revealed something new, and not just as a brief mention in one of Yi Sang's identities, that there's a market, albeit a small one compared to others, for those that want to settle disputes with a one-on-one fight, as opposed to all-out warfare, in the case of another association. Now, I theorize that it could be something as simple as a duel with swords, like their Regency dandies, to a tournament, if they wanted to be more elaborate. There's also the consideration that a duel doesn't have to be a lethal one. The Liu Association are specialists in combat requests that involve groups of people. Basically, all-out war. Although few fixers in the city go their lives without once even embroiling themselves in battle, as Don Quixote would put it. The Liu Association is unique that each individual is equipped to deal with multiple foes at once. Also, from Don Quixote's mouth, discerning the two may yet be a task too daunting for novice aficionados. Aficionados. While the Sang Association covers one-on-one situations like duels, the Liu Association handles engagements between multiple combatants. Most of the identities valued cooperation and coordination over individual action, looking carefree. As for Liu Association Gregor, apparently it was common for him to take on groups of 5 or 6 at once, proudly saying that he'd whooped those kids' heinies. Dante noted that they had incendiary devices built into all of their weapons. When asking why they used fire-starting weaponry, they gave varying answers like harmony or flow. Roundabout remarks. Dante saw fire as effective to strike foes around the target. Flames can spread. Yes. Burn! They also likely have some martial arts training to make the most of their equipment, enough for it to be effective. They certainly don't chuck those wanting to be a Liu Association fixer into the deep end. That would be a waste of time and resources. Now the She Association, they specialise in assassination. While they don't monopolise assassination jobs, requesting a she fixer is more expensive. It's also high in demand in the city, so even no-name offices in obscure streets can get that kind of request. The she are also impartial to others, as death is. And they could be considered pseudo-ninja, as they are subtle killers, at least compared to the not-so-subtle Limbus Association. Now we move on to syndicates. There are all kinds of gangs and organisations in the city, covering a range of things, which are basically any group of people together under a name. They can be called a syndicate, even those that are barely surviving, such as the Rats. Anyone gathering together to do something that's either illegitimate or unpleasant. These are usually the targets of Limbus Company to feed Mephistopheles. The backstreets. These are areas of a district not included in the nest, outside of the wing's domain. The people there are mostly those that can't afford to live in the nest. Each area stacked with restaurants, local businesses, living quarters, schools, academies, and a variety of other facilities. The roads being twisted and intertwined, a constant air of dampness wherever you go. Dante saw it as a fun thing that the boundaries between the backstreets and the nest are clearly drawn in every district that they visited. All three of them so far in Dante's case. Likely to tell the syndicates to back off, otherwise they'd be looking for trouble. Well, they wouldn't want to attract the attention of the wing's forces or hired fixers. They're perfectly safe as long as they respect that boundary. There's that unwritten and unspoken understanding between the two. Let's talk about the Blade lineage. A syndicate of sword-wielding ruffians and libertines roaming the backstreets. Based on their identities affiliated with them, they don't often act or move in groups often, despite belonging to a syndicate. Although they do so temporarily when they need to, but there's no strict subgroups or pecking order. Although the identities were taking the so proper answers can't be written. Dante either didn't know this or they didn't care. But they certainly only accept those that have at least one scar on their body. If their body lacks this, then they're considered cowards. I suspect that if they lack scars, there's a test to prove their courage, which likely would involve either inflicting self-harm or self-inflicted wounds to leave a scar on them, or accept one from the Blade lineage. They also seem to value ruthless fighters that don't hold back, such as one version of Sinclair. The Kurokumo clan are a giant syndicate spread deep and wide across the backstreets, characterized by long single-sided swords with sheaths and dark/wavy clothes. They earn their keep by taking protection fees from backstreets businesses under the pretext of offering safety. Yeah. Offering safety from them. Although that last part, they keep silent. It's a case of solution selling, as in selling a solution to a problem they created. And based on their identities, they're in conflicts with the Blade lineage. Dante didn't find out the reason, though. They follow a hierarchy. Hench people are forbidden from disobeying their superiors, although there are some special exceptions. If Kurokumo clan Honglu is to be believed. Disobeying superiors can lead to punishments, such as mutilation occurring, along with other things like speaking without permission or out of turn to a superior, much as Angela being considered an equal to a sottocapo, and a subordinate, after realizing that breach in etiquette and protocol, they remove their tongue. And at worst, questioning the decision of the capo de capi results in the removal of the head of the one who does so. And if it's a leader of a subsidiary, that's a death sentence for that suit. Well, the Kurokumo clan are thumb affiliates, and, what do you expect? The thumb are big on punishment by mutilation. Makes you wonder why they decided in the script to have those that speak out of turn or without permission having their tongues removed. I mean, where did they get their inspiration from? The Mad King from the works of George R.R. Martin? Yeah, Game of Thrones. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Let's move on to the city's technology, where from running rudimentary cogs to overlaying an alternate identity via a mirror, the city has every level of technology. And we start this part of Dante's notes with abnormalities. Dante can't define what they are. They usually have an appearance unlike a human or animal, and possesses, extraordinary powers, beings you'd expect to see in abnormal fantasies, in terms of what they look like and what they do. They tried asking Faust, and she kept saying, "Abnormalities are entities of their own category. You shouldn't attempt to define them based on any preconceived standards." Refusing to give a more detailed answer. The old L-Corp used to classify abnormalities into 5 levels. Yuri told them that they're graded based on energy production efficiency, which Limbus company also uses to categorize them. I call them eldritch horrors that are a danger to others. They can appear as twisted takes on fairy tales, representations of specific factions in the city, the birds being an example of this, and even anime come to life! They can help those that interact with them, but they can also consume them, depending on the abnormality. Then we have EGO, extermination of geometrical organ, a byproduct of enkephalin generation once done by Lobotomy Corporation. The wing produced weapons and equipment out of this for its employees to use, which doesn't seem to match what was seen of it by Dante as the EGO that the sinners used appears to work by making the emotions or self-identity of the abnormality their own. Although this isn't from personal experience, they likened it to being influenced by someone else's thoughts and bringing it to life, walking as if in their shoes, where if they don't stop at being convinced and get deeply engrossed in that other sense of self, they'll be taken over by what's carrying it. And that has killed the damned dozen a few times and hurt Dante like hell. Moses the distortion detective and her allies, not knowing this, called this psychomant, and understood it more than most, at least those outside of the Lobotomy Corporation and those with knowledge of that fallen wing. Enkephalin is the glowing green fuel originally produced by Lobotomy Corporation. Mephistopheles has a device that converts humans into enkephalin built into it, and the more alive they are, the more enkephalin is extracted, and this is based on the green liquid filling up in the tubes, which is also stored in containers of their choice for easier transports. Boxes and modules being two vital examples. Lobotomy Corporation's logo are still on the boxes, as they use them as well, which has a warning that informs that ingesting it has, hallucinogenic effects. Now, who would think to ingest that? Oh yes, that junkie known as Nezhak, formerly known as Giovanni, an orphan that came from the nest of District 11, considered by Roland to be one of the nicer nests, and I have no reason not to believe him on this, even if he's a selfish hole with little to no redeeming qualities, who has been known to drink ridiculous amounts of alcohol with his green-haired drinking buddy, much to the annoyance of Angela, who has to put up with this slacking off. The reason why Nezhak used this, and at the time he was in a prosthetic body that would make R2-D2 snigger with derision, it's to provide a temporary escape from the nightmare of the situation that was the seed of light's creation, that cycle of samsara. As for the identity, as in what is overlaid using the mirror technology, it's an invention that overlays a person's identity with a different possibility from numerous other parallel worlds. Yi Sang was one of the developers of it, although he doesn't make sense a lot of the time. Whenever they ask, useful, down-to-earth info out of Yi Sang is not to be expected. The identities are found in the engine of Mephistopheles. Dante doesn't know how it works, but they can't just grab what identities that they want. They find them through trial and error, which can allow for stumbling on previously unseen versions of the sinners. As for how those identities are used in full, it involves synchronizing their identities with their LCB PDA and the bus window, allowing them to communicate with or call it through. Yes, calling forth the image of the identity in their mind, and they get a sense of understanding as if they're talking to that variant like a version that they're familiar with. Then, once they make an unspoken agreement, the identity overrides the sinner, accompanied by the sound of glass shattering. A more suitable description can't be found by Dante. While overlaid with this identity, The sinner appears different from usual. Attire and weapons and even their personalities might be different, making Dante question if they're the sinners that they know. They seem to go back to their original selves, fortunately, when they're done using their identity. Although prolonged use might cause side effects like headaches or residual traces of the identity's personality surfacing from time to time. This was likely seen as a small price to pay for better combatants. Besides, there are identities that have managed to rebuild their lives and are actually more together than the main versions, such as the version of Emile Sinclair that's part of the Zwei Association, who desires to be a Zwei fixer to protect others, that which he failed to do with his family. Although it's something to take caution towards, as with some identities they're actually worse than the original, such as the deranged One Who Shall Grip. Utilizing parallel worlds has its benefits, but it can also have its drawbacks. With identity uptying, Dante described that as a process of synchronizing an identity with that world using the thread that they've gathered. How one brought from a different world is tuned to the sinner in hours, binding two worlds together. A freshly extracted identity can't immediately transfer all of their knowledge and combat prowess to the sinner. The thread upties the identity and makes it more effective. As for max uptie status on the PDA, they virtually become the same as the one from another world, at least in theory. If an identity was brought from a time of the world from where it was extracted with more experience, additional training, then a new possibility can occur that allows for additional stages of upthreading. That means identities from certain points in time could grow stronger, in terms of experience and technique. As for if events differing from our timeline happen in the worlds from where the identities were extracted, as time passes, Dante was told that they can't know for sure. Nor does it matter, as the Limbus company is only interested in enhancing the sinner's capabilities in battle. The alternate histories are of no concern to them. This is basically an in-universe explanation as to why, well, or rather, what uptying is and what it does for the member of the damned dozen. It increases the moves that an identity can do, and it also unlocks passives in battle. As for what thread is, they are strangely shaped objects, like a bulb, sometimes wriggling and twitching. It made Dante feel woozy when they stared at it. Faust won't even let them hold it in their hand too long. They are possibilities woven into spindles of thread. Well, that's how Faust put it, but it gave Dante a similar feeling to looking up to the star whenever they needed to heal one or more sinners when they were still alive. This is an in-universe explanation for what the material is that's used for improving identities. Then we have singularities, an incredible technology owned by the Wings, monopolized by the Wings that own them. How they differed from other technologies, well, they're outside the realm of logic or classical physics, so Faust told Dante to not think about it, at least not in their current states. But they couldn't just brush off flesh regrowing from a severed arm or stickers that boost your luck as things that just work that way, questioning if their head was a singularity as well. I doubt that, as the core of your abilities is unlikely to be entirely tied to your head. At most, it's a control mechanism for something that you already have, naturally. With thread spinning, well, that's similar to uptying, but it makes EGO more powerful using thread. Although why the different terminology? That's what Dante wanted to know. EGO was extracted from the cause of abnormalities. Using it to its full potential requires a deep understanding and well-read interpretation of the abnormality, which is why it's called thread spinning, as in spinning a yarn. This entrenches, or rather enriches, that's a better word, the comprehension of the abnormality's mental imagery, enhancing the power and effectiveness of the manifestation of the mental force through knowledge of the abnormality, and EGO being important. An in-universe explanation for, well, how to make the EGO better. Finally, we have upgrading identities. Now, when a sinner tears an identity ticket, experiences flow into them, or the identity that they're using, making them stronger than they were before. At least Faust sees it that way. It makes them better fighters, but does it make them physically stronger too? Faust and Yi Sang have vague and somewhat sensible answers about that. When an identity is upgraded using tickets, the identity's frame is enhanced. It improves physical traits, made in ways that worked in their original worlds. So, for example, when an identity with a prosthesis... Yes, a prosthesis is upgraded, the materials and components become sturdier, although it can only be upgraded up to a point, relating to the amount of golden bars collected. Dante would be unable to withstand additional upgrades. It only makes the sinner's physical body stronger. Basically, an in-universe explanation to how XP works and how it improves HP in HP in defense. Next, I shall be covering the Season 1 abnormalities. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!